Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden.
And I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And we're going to have a guest in the studio, but we have a special guest right now in the studio.
The guest is not cooperating.
And
there are issues.
The guest is lying on the floor and drinking, which is problematic at this phase of the podcast. Can we say who the guest is?
Well, just a hint, the guest is growling.
Christina brought Izzy into the studio.
I can tempt her with my champagne. Izzy?
And we're not sure that this is going to work, but we're going to try it out. And maybe we can even get Izzy to weigh in with her opinions. And if she's growling, she doesn't like how the show has already started. Anyway, welcome. Christina, you were back from New York. You were at an event last week, which was seen a little bit in the coverage as a meeting of the now newly formed Intellectual Blonde Web members.
Except we had one honorary brunette, Lee Jussum, a professor of psychology at Rutgers University. No, we were just there to talk about what we know about sex differences.
And you were with the divine Dr. So?
The divine Deborah So, Dr. Deborah So, Lee Jussum, myself. And we all agreed that even though there has been a bad history of, philosophers and theologians and others saying terrible things, historically saying terribly disparaging things about women, a lot of feminists just thought, okay, that's it. No more stereotypes about women, no more generalizations, no more discussion of sex differences. But the three of us thought that that was not the correct answer. The correct answer to bad science and twisted theory is not more bad science, not more twisted theory, not putting your head in the sand, but good science and responsible social commentary. Good, efforts to document what's really going on. And when it comes to male-female differences, there is a there.
But it's so weird that we have to keep saying that there are such things as gender differences. I think I'm going to paraphrase George Orwell, but he said it is the job of the intellect to keep repeating the obvious. And I think we sometimes we tend to do that every week here.
I know.
But with the recent trans controversies, and we had, we talked about it on a couple podcasts ago, the trans wars. But now even to say that a woman-identified non-transition man should be playing like women's tennis is a bad thing. And this week when we're going through our articles,
Martina
Navratilova has angered the transgender community by claiming that people who were born male should not be allowed to compete in women's sports events.
And here's what I love about the latest controversy around Martina is that she said this a few months ago, and it created a huge Twitter storm, and she was denounced as transphobic. And then she gave what, to me, appeared to be this now sort of ritualized public apology and, almost medieval in the sense of, I am guilty and I will never do this again. I will be quiet. I will be silent. And she did that. But what she said was...
Martina did?
She did. Apparently, what she said was, I shouldn't have said anything. I have to learn. I have to listen, and I have to learn a lot more. Well, she did listen. She did learn a lot more. And now she's come back. Izzy? Quiet. She's come back, and she's more confident than ever that something has gone badly wrong.
Well, she said in the quote, because I was surprised you said she did this apology tour. In this article that she was accused of being transphobic. And she said, clearly that can't be right. You can't just proclaim yourself a female and be able to compete against women. There must be some standards, and having a penis and competing as a woman would not fit that standard. So I think that's pretty blunt. Yeah. That's pretty ballsy, one might say.
And I think she is, first of all, this is not a conservative, cautious woman. She came out as gay, long before it was fashionable, like 1981.
Right.
She has been an advocate for women's sports, an advocate for gay rights. And the fact that she did this is meaningful and even suggestive of a possibility that there's going to be a turn in the discussion. Because I think she, and myself included you, we're not against trans rights. But we think it's going a little fast. We have not had an opportunity.
Even the trans rights are going fast. It's this assertion, as you say, that there are no gender differences.
Right.
You can just proclaim yourself something.
And without any surgery, without any hormones, you can just say,
Right.
I'm a man, but I'm going to say I'm a woman, and you better
and now become
obey my...
and now destroy your category in the Olympics by competing. If I'm, an Olympian, potential Olympian champion male.
Well, even that, to prepare for this podcast, I'd listened to some, as much hard as it was, in preparing for my presentation and just out of general interest, I tried to listen to the people. Izzy, quiet. I tried to listen to arguments in favor of having, opening up sports to anybody who identifies as a woman. And what I thought is, I did hear a few things that I thought were interesting and worthy of consideration. Mm-hmm. But we are far from reaching conclusions. We need to hear point, counterpoint. We need to have a full discussion about all of the things that are being, sort of on the trans agenda. And a lot of people start out, and this was true at our conference in New York, everyone on the panel was, sympathetic to the right of a person to transition, the right of such a person to be treated well, be treated with tolerance and compassion and understanding, and never face bullying and viciousness. But when they want us to change language to accommodate them, when they want us to basically endanger the whole category of woman in order to accommodate their needs, I'm sorry, that's going to take a little more debate and discussion. We can all agree I think, this is a legitimate civil rights issue, human rights issue, but we haven't yet determined, and worked out the details and how we're going to accommodate. There are different...
But we're not allowed to be working out the details.
We're not allowed. Because the moment you stand up, and even so humane a person as Martina Navratilova... I have a hard time saying that name. I used to know it very well. I mean, she's like one of the greatest tennis players, maybe the greatest female tennis player of all time. Even she gets called, transphobic, just because she doesn't follow the party line.
Well, at least, though, last week on our Valentine's Day episode where we talked about how the Vagina Monologues was now trans exclusive, the famous play that women would perform across America on V-Day, as it became known. It's been solved by Princeton.
Yes, they're performing it with an asterisk. They call it the Vagina Asterisk Monologues. They've problematized it.
Although that punctuation makes you think of something, I don't know. Yeah. but yes, it said they put out a statement. Said these monologues are not representative of the experiences of all women or all individuals with vaginas, the directors affirmed.
Because all genders can have vaginas.
Right, exactly.
The Princeton undergraduate.
Right. And
Izzy agrees.
Izzy, we are very upsetting Izzy with this.
Izzy's angry about the whole thing.
He's just angry.
She's a TERF.
She's a TERF.
She's a trans exclusionary.
But he went on. The director
radical
went on.
Feminist.
The director went on to say, instead, they're representative of the 200-plus women that Eve Ensler interviewed 20 years ago. And so thus they modified the title when it comes to vagina and relic. That's not a word I like. That's not words I like to put together. I came across a line I'm reading Truman Capote's Answered Prayers. And I'm not going to remember the names offhand, but I think it was like Cecil Beaton, the photographer, and a famous actress. And he said to her, what's really distressing as you get old is that your penis shrinks. And she said, I wish that were our problem. Anyway, speaking of women's parts, there was another story that caught our eye.
Yeah. So we actually have another option instead of the Vagina Monologues that we can perform. The Pussy Grabber plays.
Oh,
really?
Have you heard about this?
Is it Pussy Asterisk?
It's Pussy Grabber. It's one, no asterisk.
Wow.
So a bunch of women got together and they compiled the stories of women that Trump had allegedly sexually assaulted. And it is a series in the style of the Vagina Monologues of what happened to these women.
Where is it playing?
It's in Lower Manhattan. I think there's only been
Is it getting
one
good
production.
reviews?
Joe's Pub. It went up on January 4th.
It's in Joe's Pub. What is that?
Yeah, what's Joe got to do with it?
I don't know.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a big cast of women, and they want to make it a national tour.
No, it sounds like
around.
it sounds like a pain in the ass.
Oh, well, the ending of the play is a woman flipping off the audience with 2 middle fingers, and then the curtain.
How edifying.
That's nice. What's the point? What's the?
It's a monologue that has something to do. Find the actress's name here. The Pussy Grabber plays ends on a note of defiance. In a portion of the play called The Interview, actress Laura Lee Gayer related Stoynoff's experience with Trump in song, where the entire chorus sings fuck you," and then the show closes with both middle fingers raised.
So I wouldn't recommend that for date night. Just saying.
I don't think so.
Wouldn't do that. Can we go to another part of women's bodies?
Oh, yes.
Are women's breasts erotic is what I want to know, because apparently in a ruling, get the name of this court case. Free the Nipple, Fort Collins versus City of Fort Collins. A divided panel of the 10th Circuit has enjoined, on equal protection grounds, a city ordinance that prohibits women from baring their breasts in public, other than for purposes of breastfeeding, but imposes no restrictions on male toplessness. And the majority opinion said that it means that women should be able to bare their breasts in public. Cites with approval the district court's objection that the ordinance, quote, perpetuates a stereotype ingrained in our society that female breasts are primarily objects of sexual desire, whereas male breasts are not.
Yeah. What's the problem?
Male breasts?
No,
I think I've called a nipple a male breast.
Well, it's a doctor would say a male breast. Apparently that men, or I guess society, is not to see women's breasts as special or erotic or sexually attractive or different from a topless guy, mowing his lawn. And I just hear men across America going, yes!
I know, as if they're going to care.
No, they're going to love this one.
Provided it's the right women that take off
Right,
their
it's like nudist colonies. It's never the one you want. But this goes back to this whole idea that we can't draw any
distinctions.
Aesthetic distinctions.
We're all
sexual
just
distinctions.
This human, nondescript entity. You can't make distinctions. No. Boobs are, distracting for men.
Well, I was going to say, like,
I'm sorry.
Just like, okay. Yeah, no, I think, look, men shouldn't be allowed to wear wife beater shirts, and I'm prepared to extend that rule
I've
to
never
men.
seen one of those. That's an urban legend.
No, they do. I think you're just hanging out in the wrong parts of the country, Christina.
Well, I hope I'm not hanging out where you are, where men wear wife beater shirts. Stanley Kowalski territory.
So I think we're going to be
theater of the absurd.
Theater of the absurd.
And how far is this going to go? I mean, who is demanding the right to how many women are demanding the right to bare their chests?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're in the south of France, with
that's different, on a beach. I was once on a beach in I know the year 1978 with my late husband Fred and this philosophy professor Michael Lockwood and Tamler, who was 8 years old. These Swedish girls started to play volleyball, topless, right on the beach on this island in the Cyclades.
They live up to the image or the stereotype of Swedish girls.
They were perfect girls. And my husband was just astonished. And he was most astonished that Michael Lockwood, this Oxford Don, who just wanted to talk about the logical behavior of the word good and, and never noticed. And he wasn't gay. But he did not even notice. And then Tamler, who was 8, a few years later, Fred told this story, and Tamler said, "Where was I? I didn't see it." And Fred said, "You were right there. You didn't." Tamler, to this day, is trying to go back and recover the memory. These were...
That's a good trigger. Like, why can't I trigger that memory?
But so I know, I would just say that it's not the Swedish women's volleyball team on the Greek island that's likely to
No,
liberate.
you're going to be in the Whole Foods, and there's going to be some 75-year-old woman. Let's just, going through the dried fruit section.
Oh, God.
and we're not going to be happy. Thank you, judges.
I don't even want to
see
maybe Brad Pitt in Whole Foods without his shirt.
Yeah, but no. Look, do you want to see those Italian men in Speedos on Italian beaches?
And, I just, in preparation for the podcast, I looked up like male stars shirtless just to see, like, they look pretty good. But, in the 60s and 70s, they were hairy.
Okay, do you want to see? Yeah, but you might want to see Brad Pitt in the Whole Foods without a shirt, but would you really want to see John Goodman? So I think it goes both ways on men and women, and it's never going to be the people you want. But anyway, was there anything else? Oh, hang on. There was a story about. We couldn't download this whole story. It was about boomer parents drinking too much.
Yes,
how children of boomer parents.
How do they have an intervention?
How they have to have an intervention? Yeah. How do you tell your boomer parents they're drinking too much? Like, Mom, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you.
I think we need advice on what do boomer parents tell their scoldy kids, which is, you are written out of the will, dear.
Yeah. Well, it's like. It says, when I hosted a party to celebrate my 4-year break from alcohol, I didn't expect my parents to turn up armed with bottles of champagne. I was marking the publication of my book, The 28-Day Alcohol-Free Challenge, which chronicles my mission to give up booze. Okay, these are highly insensitive parents.
You're triggering Christina.
I'm disinheriting these children. I'm disinheriting them.
Lay over the kitchen table next to an assortment of soft drinks and healthy snacks. But I opened my front door, and there they were, my mother and father, standing gleefully on my front step with bottles of bubbly tucked under each arm. Well, I'm hanging with the parents in that corner.
With the parents and kids. Just stop. Leave us alone. We've got enough problems.
We need booze. We need booze. Thanks to you.
Yeah.
So was there anything else before we bring on our guest who isn't Izzy?
Yes. I am afraid that there is something important we need to talk about.
Uh-oh. I thought we were going to talk
That's afterwards.
Later about that.
Later on. Hold it later on. Off air.
Oh, no.
Apple has decided to introduce 57 new emojis that are going to premiere soon.
Well, that's good. We could all use more emotional representation.
I personally think there are enough of them already, but fine. Except for one, they are releasing the period emoji.
You mean not like as in full stop?
In
or
the punctuation,
no.
the semicolon.
It is the
cousin of the semicolon?
No. It is a full drop of red blood.
Oh, I thought we were getting away from
we're getting away. Please, I'm begging you.
No.
Demonstrators are winning.
Oh, my God.
Why would you? I guess you'd use this to say, hey, sorry I snapped at you last night, period. Emoji.
And that's kind of menopause exclusionary.
You know what it is. And what if it just makes me want to cry tears of blood?
Yes.
Be excluded from this.
Well, they said that it was meant to be something that made it okay for young teenage girls to talk about having their period. Because
why do they have to talk about it? Nobody wants to talk about it. Do you want to talk about having, I don't know, mucus? Do you want to talk about boils?
Do they have a mucus emoji? A sneeze emoji?
But they did. So I guess they did a
hemorrhoids. Now and that's an issue.
They did a popular vote on what the design was supposed to be. Like, they gave people options.
Is it?
The options were a sanitary pad, smiling blood droplets, a uterus, or a monthly calendar.
Which one?
And then the blood drop. The blood drop was the one.
Yeah, what would it be like a stain sanitary?
Oh, this is not how men came to power, ladies. Men did not come to power with them. This is male female differences. Only like lunatic females could demand a thing like that. I'm just saying.
Well, I was going to say, just from a graphic perspective, the tampon could have worked.
The tampon could have worked.
No, why?
Little pills, Who
needs it?
I don't know. What are those little women doing high kicks with hearts around them? I mean,
we don't
who uses those? Like there are.
I use that all the time. I like that. My sister and I use that all the time.
Like the syringe emoji.
I feel diminished.
Who uses like the syringe emoji or one of like hospitals?
The syringe emoji. That's useful when you're doing, your pusher.
All right, you know what? I think now that Izzy's quiet, we can bring on our guest. We're talking today to Olivia Nuzzi, who is New York Magazine's first ever Washington correspondent. And what's sort of amazing about her is she is all of 27 years old. She's had an amazing fast career. She was at Fordham College. She quit when she was working on the Anthony Weiner campaign, which we'll ask her about, to become a full-time writer at the Daily Brief. She's a very gifted writer, but just a wonderful observer of what it's like to cover politics, the White House, Congress, right now.
And it's not relevant, but she's gorgeous and lovely, and she will tell us about this, a moment where she was at the White House and somehow it came to pass that the president called her into his office.
Weren't you just going to be so surprised by that story that there'd be this beautiful young woman in the White House
and somehow,
for some reason,
she was summoned.
Donald Trump summoned her in, but she'll tell us about that.
When the staff were triggered and made sure.
I think that's a daily. I think that's
a daily
thing, hourly thing.
Anyway, what a great guest.
We'll bring on Olivia.
Well, Olivia Nuzzi is in the studio, and we're very excited about interviewing her. Welcome to the Femsplainers.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we always start with the most important question, which is your favorite cocktail, because we like to serve it or at least post it if we can.
Negroni.
Same cocktail as last week.
We had it last week.
But this is like the first time we'd had a Negroni ever.
Really?
And then
twice in a row.
Right. And so this is like
Kismet. She must meet Jim Carney.
Well, that is a great cocktail. Actually, do you know the history of the cocktail?
I guess I don't.
Aside from it being drunk in Rome, because remember we asked him about the history, and then my son was listening to it, and he's a big Negroni fan. He's like, I can't believe you didn't tell the actual history. And now I'm going to blow it, and he's going to get mad at me. But there was a Lord Negroni.
Oh.
You know what? I'll record the story after because I'm going to go look it up. But there was a Lord Negroni, and apparently he went into his favorite place, and he wanted a drink that was stronger than his usual martini. And that's when they poured Campari into it.
Is it stronger than a martini?
Yeah, because it's got Campari. It's got what, gin?
It's equal parts gin, sweet vermouth, and Campari.
And Campari.
Yeah.
So a martini would just be gin and vermouth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe just a kiss of...
Yeah, well, Campari is like not very high alcohol content.
But it has a kick.
No, they definitely make you a little...
It's too early in the day for any sane person to be drinking, so I'm, of course, drinking.
Yeah, but it's champagne, and it's not a mimosa, thank goodness.
And it has low alcohol content, in my opinion.
It's never too early to have champagne. But anyway, welcome, Olivia. So we talked about you being not only New York's Magazine's first ever Washington correspondent, but you're 27 years old.
I'm 26.
Oh, okay. I checked your birthday. Same year as Miranda. She's 20.
No, I just turned 26 in January.
Okay.
So
Are you trying to age shame her? Or
what the hell?
Anything wrong?
I'm never coming back
26?
to this show.
Well, there's that certain age where you lie about your age and make yourself older, and then you start.
Well, I actually have a strong theory of when you lie about your age, the big mistake is women always go younger, right? And usually by like 5 or 10 years, something that's easy to remember.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we should always round up. So if you add 5 years to your age, every time you tell someone your age, they're going to say, oh my God, you look fantastic.
I think about this a lot because I would much prefer people to think I look wonderful for my age than to think I look I'm younger but look terrible.
Right,
you know?
right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So she
I'm just gonna
looks
start telling
really
people
tired.
I'm 50.
Wow.
Well, there has to be then they'll think you've had really serious work done. And anyway, but aside from being 26,
Thank you.
and this newly appointed role position at New York Magazine, I mean, you've been. Politico has named you one of the 16 breakout media stars. You're on the Forbes annual 30 under 30. How did this happen? What universe did you just rocket out of and to here?
I think I got very lucky being assigned to what turned out to be the biggest story in American politics, certainly, if not the world, at the beginning of Donald Trump's campaign. And at the moment, it did not seem like it was the best assignment in the world, right? Nobody thought that Donald Trump was very serious or that he would get the nomination or win the presidency. And I didn't really have a plan for what to do after Hillary Clinton won, as everyone suspected that she would. But it turned out
you were covering him for the Daily Beast.
I was, yeah. So I dropped out of Fordham to join the Daily Beast full time in March of 2014, and I was there for 3 years. And then right after the inauguration, I joined New York Magazine.
So, but you broke out. I thought the story you were going to tell that you broke out on. I mean, before Donald Trump, that came after you'd moved to the Daily Beast.
Mm-hmm. There was another campaign or politician
kind of broke
your
out
past.
on.
Yeah, I think you
have a lot of bad guys in your past.
I can pick them. I can really pick them. I was not sure. I started writing in high school. Because I got involved in local politics and I thought it was very ridiculous and fun and interesting. And so I had a column at an alt weekly in Asbury Park, New Jersey called the Tri-City News. It was like a monthly political column, but I realized very quickly that I was not ideological in the way that I thought I might be, and I ran out of ideas for columns after like 3 columns.
So it was like an opinion column.
Yeah, and I had like no opinions. I was 17.
That's very mature of you to realize that, because most people, even well into their 20s and 30s, who don't have opinions and shouldn't be pundits, continue to write.
And when I realized it was very, I would file something and then I would think, well, I could have just as easily argued a different, maybe not the other side, but certainly a different facet of the argument. And I thought, if I was considering going into politics, I thought I might want to be a speechwriter, that I ought to get some experience and know what the hell I was talking about. And so when I was at Fordham, Anthony Weiner began running for mayor of New York City, and I thought maybe they'll be dumb enough to let me be an intern. When my whole resume was writing, I thought...
This was 2013,
clearly,
right?
Yeah.
This was after he'd already had the scandal.
Yes.
And then he came back. He's going to have the big comeback.
And it did look
it looked good
for a moment.
Did you see the movie? Were you in the movie?
I thank my previous self every day that I did not agree to be in that documentary.
Wise even back then.
So I became an intern on the campaign, and after about a month, I was like the world's worst intern. I never showed up, and I didn't really do anything when I was there. I just kind of liked to lurk around and observe.
So you signed up deliberately to observe and write, potentially write about it.
No, I did. I signed up because I thought, what better place to learn about political communications than on that shit show of a campaign, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have someone who is this national media curiosity, who is prone to self-destructive behaviors, running for mayor in the center of the biggest media market in the world. So why not? Why not get some experience there?
Right, and
but I did think, I thought I might potentially write about it one day, but I wasn't sure. That wasn't my number one goal going in there. But I left, and I had an assignment with a magazine called NSFW Corp to profile a politician in New Jersey, and I just thought, I just want to focus on that. And then maybe a few weeks later, Anthony Weiner had another sex scandal where he was sexting this woman, Sydney Leathers.
Sydney Leathers.
So aptly named, Sydney Leathers.
And she's a fantastic writer. She now has a column at the newly launched Penthouse website.
Do you notice how many of our writers, weirdly, are coming to... I mean, I realize it says something about us, but we've had a lot of columnist for Penthouse on this show.
I think they're publishing some really great stuff right now.
It's become a center of sort of dissident
People
journalism.
are reading it again for the articles.
Just for the articles.
And my editor at NSFW Corp, I remember him calling me that day that the story broke, and it was like this enormous moment in the media. And he said, this is his exact quote. He said, "If you don't write about this, you're a terrible reporter, and I'm an even worse editor." And so I filed a very short thing to him about Anthony Weiner introducing himself to all of the interns one day and calling me Monica repeatedly, which I thought was hilarious. And then I filed another short item, I think about like some staffing issue, and then I got a call from Annie Carney, a reporter at the New York Daily News, asking me if I would be interested in I think talking to her, and ultimately I got the New York Daily News to allow me to write a column on one condition, that they not use my photo or put me on the cover of the New York Daily News. And the next day I woke up on the cover of the Daily News under the headline "Ween Turn."
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't you want to be on the cover? Who doesn't want
I didn't want it to look like I had sold my story to them, like I did, right? But I was writing it.
Right.
I didn't want to look like I was, talking to a tabloid, like to tell all. And I didn't want to,
But do you think they did that? I mean, we can say it on this show. You're obviously a beautiful young woman.
Thank you.
And
Not that
for
that
50,
matters at
for
all.
50, I look great.
you look amazing for 50. I want to know your doctor after the show.
She's 26. Don't believe Danielle.
There are obstacles to that, too. And I think what you saw with the New York Daily News, right, is like, not only have we got this great story, but we got a young woman we want to put on the cover. Do you find that happens with you? Or?
I learned later that there was a staff meeting held at the Daily News from somebody who I ended up working with at the Daily Beast, who worked there at the time, where the premise of the meeting was, how likely do we think she will be to sue us if we go back on this promise and use her photo and put it on the cover? And they determined that it was probably unlikely. It might be good for my career, and I'll thank them later. And they were right. But I don't think there's much downside to being, I think there's a tremendous amount of privilege, to use a term that's become quite annoying.
You're using it in traditional understanding
but
of the word.
there's a lot of privilege that comes with appearing a certain way that's accepted by our society, and I don't think I've ever felt like that perception of my appearance that you just said is a hindrance at all.
Okay.
I think to the contrary.
But like in this case, it's potentially embarrassing you, as you said, in a way that you didn't want to be mistaken for a... Earlier that day, I remember it came out, and I remember my father at the time calling me and saying, "Why are you on the cover of the Daily News?" And I was totally mortified, and I was like hiding in my dorm room because I was on the newsstands every time I tried to go outside, and I was devastated. But then later that day, a story was published by Hunter Walker, who at the time was working for Talking Points Memo, quoting the spokeswoman for Anthony Weiner's campaign. I don't know if I can say these words on your program. Oh, I have them lined up.
If you want to, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you
please,
go ahead.
After you.
We'll let Izzy say it. What is it?
Okay, Director Barbara Morgan, when those stories came out about that you'd written, she said she thought her interview was off the record, and called you a fame-hungry bitch who sucked at her job and a slut-bag twat and cunt. Well, that's sisterhood.
It was she slut-bag. A slut-bag, fucking twat was the exact quote, and little cunt.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I missed those. I guess I summarized
I'm just asking.
She was on the record.
Do journalists talk that way?
Journalists.
Yeah, in newsroom.
Well, this was a
I know they do in
This
Britain.
is a communications
This is
director.
politics. But she's in politics. I mean, you'd think that'd be even
so this
more
was the communications director for the campaign speaking to a reporter, and she claimed that she was off the record, but she was not.
No, but it's still to your point. Who talks like that?
But once that happened, I appreciated the creativity, because I'm sure you guys are insulted online a lot, and it's a lot of just the same shit, and it's, how many times can you be called a bimbo or an airhead or whatever.
Yeah.
Not enough, really.
But I did appreciate the creativity. I have to say.
I'd like to be a bimbo. I know.
What happened
miss being a bimbo?
What happened to like trollop or words like that?
No, that's what we get
really...
now. Old fish, old trout.
But when that happened, I think everyone thought I would be very upset, but I was relieved because I thought comparatively I looked like angelic. I was cleansed of any sin because she looked so terrible and I looked like a victim, which I wasn't. But I was just totally relieved from that the focus was now on me, looking like I was being victimized by that language rather than I sold my story.
But it is. I mean,
she was right, though. I was a terrible intern.
Politics and this side of journalism, it's not something I know it sort of happens in bars and people use sorts of language. I mean, I grew up in reporting circles, but you just wouldn't talk this way. It's the way the mooch talked on the phone to reporters. I just don't, off the record or on the record, I don't understand this new insult culture.
Well, I think that's why that language that she used, I mean, it resulted in this like 72-hour news cycle. Nice
job, campaign communications director.
She actually ended up reaching out to me maybe 2 years ago, and we're now friends.
Really?
Yeah.
I can see that.
I really like her. Yeah, I think she's a good person.
She sounds fine.
I like these stories.
She's hot-headed.
I like these stories of forgiveness. It reflects well on you.
I never needed to forgive her. I wasn't upset.
Well, but somebody called you those names.
Yeah, but it's like I don't know how you guys feel.
It's never really about you.
It's
not about. I got that.
It's like they're talking about some other version, some avatar of you, right?
Fantasy, and I don't take those kinds of things.
But I'm very. I mean, this experience was great for two reasons. I mean, cynically, it did really help my career in that I think it could have gone either way, right? It could have, if I had gone on the talk show circuit and said yes to every request for an interview back then, I think it probably would have gone very poorly for me. But I just went radio silent pretty much, and the news cycle passed.
Right.
And the mob moved on.
Immense good judgment.
Thank you.
And
that's what I say in every argument I'm in.
Now, where do you get that?
Yeah, where does that go? No, but to have at your age and younger as it was, that sense of what to say and what not to say, be the self-awareness that you're not a pundit.
I don't know. Well, thank you for saying that, but I don't know. I don't know. Well, it ended up. I think there was some curiosity, especially in New York media, when I wanted to meet editors after the fact, in the next couple of months when I was trying to get assignments. And
I'm that twat.
Yeah, I think there was just a moderate amount of curiosity where I was able to get the meeting with the editor and, turn that into an assignment. And it was also great because I think not many journalists the beginning of their career have the experience of being a subject, and so it has colored the entire way that I approach my work because I know what it's like to be written about and be talked about.
That's super valuable because you're in now, as we know, in the White House. You're in that daily huddle often, right, on the lawn in the Rose Garden, getting with your...
Do you ever get called on by...
No.
No? Do you raise your hand?
Well, I do. I probably raise my hand like 50% of the time when I'm there and they're taking questions. But the questions I have for the most part are like not conducive to that environment. I'm not going to be like, tell me about your relationship with your mother, like in a room full of reporters.
That's what I was going to say about what is sort of wonderful about the way you write and cover it. You're more like a Virgil taking an outsider through
a novelist.
These levels of the circles of hell and purgatory. But it's very observational and
thank you.
And that's sort of writing at its best because you are able to convey what it feels like. So I like one of your recent stories where you're talking about, I guess, the president calling a state of emergency. And he looks really, the column was headlined, President looks really bored as he calls state of emergency. You had how much he hates the Christmas cocktail parties. And you really get to sort of see inside and get a sense of that culture inside the White House and for this president in ways that in more partisan telling or in, or you're just reading the news in the Washington Post, you just don't get the feel of it. And I guess you're right. That's what a novelist.
Where did you, if you had to say what was the best advice you ever given as a writer? Like tips, just cheap tricks we can all use and be better.
I mean, the best advice, which is sort of, it's like an old piece of advice I think everyone gets, but it's just to show and not tell. And that's what I try and do with every piece, I know.
That's
it's
hard.
Very simple.
It's hard, though.
But I think...
Unless it's actually a gift to be able to find that telling detail.
Well, and also removing yourself the way you do. Like you're not also not the hero or heroine of your own story. You're there taking very shrewd notes about what's going on around you.
Well, thank you. And then the best piece of advice, actually, other than that I've ever received is, to just tell the story that you would tell a friend at a bar.
Right.
Because that's what I want to read anyway. When
I try to write a lecture or an article, I write an email to my late mother, but I lost her this year, but I used to write to her and explain it to her. And then it was what I wanted to say.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Well, to go back to what it's like to be in the White House, you recently just reviewed Cliff Sims' book, Team of Vipers. Mm-hmm. Read a lot about that, and he seems to be sort of trying to be both,
insider,
but also outside.
I think he's
he doesn't want to be disloyal, but
loyal insider.
You had this wonderful description, which I think it must feel like for you, where you described one of the most interesting moments in his book as a scene in which a crisis surrounding the president is unfolding in the press, as it always is, and Sim finds himself and his colleagues standing around watching it happen on the TVs in the West Wing. And he writes, "It was like we all started just watching the television show, forgetting that we were actually supposed to be supporting actors." Mm-hmm. I mean, is that how the press feels in as well? Or do you feel like TV critics as opposed to political journalists?
That's an interesting way to put it. I think when the press is its worst version of itself, we are acting like TV critics. Mm-hmm. There's some stories sometimes about the communications shop in the White House, and the thrust of the articles seem to be they're not manipulating us effectively. What's wrong with them? As if that's something that that's the goal that we should hold them to. That is my favorite part of that book. I don't know how the reporters feel who cover it day to day, for the papers or for TV. I kind of have the privilege of being at 10,000 feet and trying to, I get to take time on articles.
Which can sometimes be a hindrance, especially in this world.
Yeah. I mean, it can be a hindrance because it's difficult to write something big picture about something that's a topic that's changing day to day. But no matter how much news there is in a given week, normally if you assess it at the end of the week, nothing's really changed. There might be 100 breaking stories in 1 week, but from Monday to Friday, the general theme is the same. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how. I don't envy the reporters who are kind of on the hamster wheel of the daily news cycle. I don't know how they feel, but they look very tired.
It looks like a frightening job, and you have to produce all this copy and write instantly. And I don't know how they do.
I think it's very impressive. I don't know how they do it, but at the same time, the stories all kind of follow similar themes, right? It's not like each day you're thrust into this new universe of a new news cycle. It's all kind of the same.
Well, how is it different from from the outside? It looks, we have this sense it's all out of control, it's crazy, and you've got your sort of description of these surreal press conferences where he comes out to say one thing and he ends up, as we all know, going on 50 other topics. Is that a fair assessment? Because it also led to, because I want you also to talk about this bizarre moment where you were just pulled into the office with President Trump and you got this incredible interview with him. So, and you got to sort of see the dynamics of his staff around him. So give us a little sense of
what happened.
What is
tell
true.
us what happened.
Yeah, tell us that, and then what is true from what we see, and
how
what
did he
isn't
find
true.
you and pull you in, and what did the staff think, and what the hell happened there?
I was working on a story about John Kelly, who was then the chief of staff, and the general idea was like, why is he still there? I knew that Trump had tried to fire him a number of times, but he managed to hang on longer than anyone thought that he would. And there were always stories, I'm sure you read them, he's hanging on by a thread, he's about to be fired. And so I just wanted to know what was taking so long, basically. Why was he still surviving? I went to the White House one morning for a series of interviews on that topic, and I was very late. I was supposed to have filed my story already, and we were relaunching our politics section at New York Magazine the next day, and this was supposed to be like the lead story for that section, and it did not exist yet.
That's
I
pressure.
had been up all night the night before my morning of interviews trying to write this piece that didn't exist, and when the time came for me to leave for the White House, I remember I had like 800 words about John Kelly's military career. And I was like, where'd the time go that I wasted on this? So I was like preparing to move to Mexico and change my name so my editors wouldn't fire me. And then I was leaving the White House, and I stopped to talk to a photographer outside in the driveway and have a cigarette. And then I looked down at my phone. I had this missed call from a DC number I didn't recognize. And when I called back, it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders' secretary, and who I hate. Her secretary, we have like a lot of friction. But she was
But you're not going to call her names?
No, I wouldn't call her names. But I find her deeply unpleasant. But anyway, she then put me through to Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and Sarah Huckabee Sanders asked me if I was still there and for me to come back to her office, and she sounded very serious. And
that could be a threat. Are you still there? Depends how she says.
Right. It sounds like, I'm sorry, it sounds like he caught sight of you and thought, bring her to
Yeah, that's the sort of scare. That's what I was wondering about.
Well, I assumed that she was going to yell at me for something, because she sounded so serious. I didn't recognize the tone in her voice. And then when I went back to her office, she looked. In retrospect, I think the look on her face was fear about what was going to happen next. But she just looked very serious.
Stricken.
Yeah. And I couldn't quite follow what she was like gesturing at me. And then she told me I could put my things in her office. And then it became clear she was bringing me to see the president.
Wow.
And you think some of her hesitation was, I do not think this is a good idea.
I cannot imagine that any communications person
would think that was
a good idea. And I think that there's this is just my best guess, but I think there's probably a particular concern about bringing any young woman into the Oval Office with the president.
Oh, why? Why was that?
You just don't know what he's going to say, right? And yeah, and then I just couldn't quite follow what she was trying to tell me, and then it clicked, and I think there was like 40 seconds between her walking back there with me and me standing outside the door, and then walking in there and
it was just you
him.
And
it was me, and then when I walked into the Oval, it was Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Bill Shine, and then the president came in.
Exactly. What month would this have been?
This was October, mid or late October, yeah. And then the president came in, and he just immediately started, I heard you're working on this story, and I want to tell you a couple things, and thankfully I was recording already. So.
Yeah. What was that? I mean, how did you feel at that moment?
Surreal. Any time that you see him, especially when I see him in the White House, I kind of just think like, this fucking guy. I mean, I grew up reading the New York Daily News and the New York Post every day when my father would bring them home from work, and I grew up with The Apprentice, and I cannot remember a time when I was not aware of Donald Trump. I feel like if you grow up, especially you grow up like in the tri-state area, if you've ever lived in New York, like he's your person. Like you feel some kind of ownership over the concept of Donald Trump, if that makes sense at all.
Or you're
so familiar with him. For instance, at New York Magazine, we have this this questionnaire we've been giving to notable people for, I think, decades. And one of the questions, I think it's 21 questions that we ask, is what do you think of Donald Trump? Like, he's almost like he's a piece of the furniture.
Yeah, that was
in New York.
before he was president.
Yeah, long before.
Yeah.
So he's just a piece of the skyline
So even with the backdrop of the Oval Office and these people around him, you still look at him and you go, this putz. Like the...
It's not with any contempt, really.
Yeah. It's like some guy in high school that you knew that was kind of, crazy guy.
Just someone who you're deeply familiar with. I don't know quite how to describe it, but
as a reporter, you must be flipping out in a good way.
I was aware. I knew I was recording it. I didn't know who else might be recording it. I didn't want to screw it up. I didn't want to make the mistake of... I was trying to be very strategic about when I interjected. I think I was aware in the moment that there were going to be probably people on the left who would read whatever I ended up writing and yell at me.
Why didn't you ask him?
Right? Why didn't you ask him about this?
Yeah,
why didn't
real
you
pressure.
Why didn't you save the country from the president with your questions? And my goal was kind of just to keep him talking and get him comfortable and have him talk as much as possible. So I tried to just be careful about making sure that I did that. But I did notice at one point I didn't feel nervous, but sometimes when I am nervous anyway, like my nose will twitch or my hand will twitch or something. And when he handed me this sheet of paper with his accomplishments on the sheet of paper,
describe that because that was pretty funny.
He yelled for his secretary at one point because I think he said something about his accomplishments, and I was like what? And he yelled for the secretary, and she came in like a second later with these 2 pieces of paper with, I think, 58 bullet points of his alleged accomplishments. And one of them, I remember, was like, it was something like, I wish I had
it in front of me now. Is the skating rink on there?
It was like that. It was
that
like,
impressed me.
It had on the first page, I forget actually, but on the second page, it was this Republican talking point.
Yeah, the first page it was like tax reform and rolling back
Obamacare.
This or that, right? And then the second page, it just evolved into confidence and just random.
But you
Republican
hadn't even expressed any doubt. I think it was sort of brought out like a party favor, like every journalist who comes into this office.
Yeah, and then but
I know that you don't think I've done
at this point. I believe Mike Pence was in the room,
right,
and he was standing rather awkwardly, like right to my left, over my shoulder, kind of hovering, because I don't think he knew I don't think there was any chair for him, or he knew what.
Also,
to
this
do.
was completely spontaneous, right? That you
right, but I noticed as I was sitting there holding the paper that like my hands started to rattle a little bit, even though I didn't feel nervous, and so I just put the paper down on my lap because I didn't want him to see or Pence to see, my hands shaking, and I didn't feel nervous, but I think the adrenaline was basically it felt like an intervention. It was like the president was trying to tell me that my story and the questions that he had seen, I had sent to one press official, that the premise was all off and everything was actually going great, and everyone was happy with each other and nobody was going to be fired. And he proceeded to welcome a number of officials into the room who at various levels of confusion on their faces.
Because the point was there was no scheduled meetings.
No, there was a scheduled lunch for the president and Mike Pompeo.
Oh, okay.
And Pence seemed to be aware possibly of the story that I was working on because it related to one of his aides, his chief of staff as well. But poor Mike Pompeo walked into the room and he was like, had no idea what was going on and looked deeply confused and had to sit there while Trump, said things like, so I tell her, isn't everything going great?
But then is that a true perception that we have, that it is kind of chaotic, that nobody can really manage it?
Certainly. And I don't think he has any desire to be managed. I think he wants things to function well in there, right? He doesn't want it to be like a disaster where nobody knows, what meetings are taking place or what they have to do for the day or the week. But at the same time, I don't think he fares very well with any kind of structure being forced onto him.
A few weeks ago, against the advice of his staff, I'm sure, he invited 2 New York Times reporters in for just a open
Are you talking about when
discussion.
he called the publisher of the New York Times?
Yes.
And
I'm sorry, it was the publisher and a reporter.
And they brought, he wanted to have an off-the-record with them, right?
And but they came twice, but the second time they agreed to have it on the record. And there was something almost poignant in this, and I could tell it affected the publisher. And they were doing the usual, and Trump was accusing, fake news and all that. But at a certain point he said, if just once there could have been a story about me, I'm from Queens, I'm a kid from Queens that made good. Couldn't you just once have written that story? And they kind of realized, that's what he wants. He wants, a local boy makes good, and he's mad at his local paper. I mean, of the many things that are going on in his head. Yeah. This seemed to be this driving passion.
Mm-hmm. Well, he has a preoccupation, clearly, with the New York Times, and as much as I think a lot of his frustration, it kind of comes from this place of, sorrow, where he just wants acceptance from the New York Times, and he wants acceptance from New York society in general, from Manhattan, because I think, I'm not the first person to make this observation, but he has a certain sense that he's an outsider because he's from Queens. Like a lot of us, Trump wants what he cannot have, or what is being denied to him, right? So I think if he were to be accepted by New York elite or the media elite, he would reject it.
He must, as you noted, his demeanor at the Christmas parties, he must look back and think of what he threw away, because his marriage to Melania was like the apex of a social.
Yeah, the Clintons were there.
Every politics, celebrity, fashion, all.
Yeah,
I don't think he feels like that. I think that he
might not have felt it, but it was certainly to the idea that he was missing something. I mean, there's something megalomaniacal that in him that eventually I think made him want to become president.
But I think that
even that wasn't enough.
I think that the campaign, part of the reason why it worked, certainly, but I think the reason why he even engaged in the exercise of the campaign to begin with is that he wanted to reveal all of those people, including the people on the guest list at his wedding at Mar-a-Lago, for what they really were, for the strivers that they were, for the cynical networkers, or
unlike him.
Well, I think that there is a certain...
You're better at it than him.
I think there's a certain honesty to him when it comes to, the game and how it's played, right? Even if he's a participant in it. He's talked about, for instance, donations to Democrats and Republicans over the years because he's in construction, and how he's had to play the game. He talks about that openly. Sorry, I'm laughing at the dog here.
Izzy is in the studio and is interrupting the podcast.
She disagrees.
But, Tina Brown told us that, she doesn't like him now, obviously, because she can't, but that he was kind of fun. And if you sat next to him at a dinner party or met him, he was... Well,
I did, as I think, I can't remember if I told in that podcast story, I did actually sit next to him at a dinner party.
Oh, it was you.
In the 90s. And she was at the table.
Tina.
So there was Tina Brown, a guy who went to prison eventually, but very, very that describes a lot of people. And I sat next, and he was on my other side. As I approached the table, I got to the table early, and my husband David was with me, taking me to the table because we were separated. And I saw the place card said Donald Trump. And at that point of time, he was still I think it was before The Apprentice. He was still the sort of New York Magazine, New York Post Donald Trump. And even then, I kind of recoiled and thought, oh my God, what am I going to do here? I can't, this could be, can I change seats? I don't know what to say to this guy. And anyway, of course, you have to go through with it. We had a blast. He was so funny and charming, and we just weirdly hit it off, and we started talking about all these things that were going on in New York. And I remember seeing Tina Brown across the table looking at me strangely, like, "What is going on over there?" And I had this really old guy about to go to prison. He was the head of Sotheby's, and the name is just anyway. He was also a very loyal friend to the guy who went to prison, and our host Conrad Black also would go to prison a few years later.
And was he loyal to Conrad?
And he claims Trump remained loyal to him. So I guess the Trump I see now from that brief glimpse, and of course following him over the years through the media, it doesn't seem like the same one. I mean, it seems more like you see mental deterioration, you see things emerging in the older personality that have maybe gotten bigger, and the better parts of him have fallen away. But I mean, his game has never changed.
Yeah. But a woman, Barbara Rez, who worked for him at the Trump Organization for a long time, I remember her telling me that at a certain point, after he started to become immensely famous in a global way, he lost his self-awareness. Like, you were no longer able to joke around with him, or at a certain point he just became humorless about himself, and he began to deteriorate in terms of his personality. I don't know about mentally.
Anyway, but let's talk about Melania. So did you ever see her? Have you seen her? Have you talked to her? What is her presence like at the White House?
You know, it's interesting. I don't think that the public is always, or even reporters are always aware of when she is there or when she is not there. You know, they don't release a schedule every day the way that the president releases a schedule, or the vice president.
You get this sense she's this ghost-like or floating above presence that I think sort of slips in and out.
I think that, like with anyone, any public figure who does not reveal a lot of themselves, most of our perception of her is colored by the way that we're projecting onto her. You know, the media, everyone projects onto her so much. The right projects onto her, the left projects onto her, and I don't think that any of it is really correct. And I think what gets lost in the way that we interpret her is that she has a history of really seeming to agree with some of the president's most incendiary beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. She defended birtherism back in like 2012 or 2011, whenever that began, when Trump was on his kind of birther crusade. I don't think that she is like this prisoner.
Remember, Julia Ioffe and others who have criticized him, she's come out and threatened and pushed and even bullied back.
And I think it's easy for anybody in the White House to get kind of in that bunker mentality. And I think that was probably always true with any administration, but especially for this one. And I don't think that she's any different in that sense.
I think there's just one difference. I don't think she ever wanted this or expected it to happen. I think...
But neither did he.
Right. He didn't expect it to happen. I'm sure he thought he wanted it.
I don't even
think
know
he wanted
that.
it. My reporting about the beginning of the campaign always showed that he thought that he would get in. He would prove to everyone who said that he would never actually run that he was actually going to run. He would poll high enough to be seen as not a joke. And then he would get out and go back to The Apprentice and be an even bigger star and make more money.
Or start a new, like, Trump network or something bigger.
What I was always told was that he just wanted to go back to The Apprentice, but then when NBC canceled that contract, I think amid the uproar over the announcement speech and his comments about Mexican immigrants, that was no longer a viable option, and he kind of had to stand.
I've always thought he was like this marathon runner. And then you remember 1980. Well,
this is the first time Trump has ever been compared to a marathon runner.
No, this is not. This is a
I think that's where that.
This is a marathon runner manqué. Rosie Ruiz. She ran the marathon in Boston, but she won. She didn't really intend to win. She just wanted to get a little celebrity, or I don't know. I don't know why she did it. She was like some Cuban American runner, and she was in the female category in the 84th Boston Marathon. She cheated. She entered like the last mile. So everybody,
I would run a marathon.
Yeah, me too. I thought it was a great idea. But then to come in first place, nobody saw her pass. Nobody saw. And it was like the worst thing in her life that she won, because if she'd come in third or fourth, it would just be great. She'd get some accolades and things. And I thought he's sort of like that. He entered. I mean, not that he cheated, but still, he didn't prepare.
Well, he might have had help.
And there could have been some.
But definitely, and she seems that way. But
everybody agrees, though, that Melania, before he decided to run, she was always the only person who would say, you shouldn't run, but if you do run, you'll win. Yeah. Like, she was the only one who really thought that it would happen. And I think maybe some of that is that, like...
So I read a book by an insider, I forget which one, who said that she was weeping the night of...
That was Michael Wolff. I don't know if I would call him an insider.
Believe it. Yeah.
I think inside a lot.
Inside something, I don't know.
He's certainly inside the lobby of the West Wing.
I think Michael Wolff is very interesting because that book, I think, it was probably factually maybe like 30% true, but spiritually like 95% true. I think there was a lot of
just
insight about. I think there was a lot of insight in that book about what it really feels like there, or what it felt like, and he grasped a lot of the different dynamics, but a lot of the details I remember thinking were a bit fishy.
Has the mood changed since the midterms? Mm-hmm. You get that sense. I get the sense even from the media now that since the Democrats took the House and since it's 2020 coming up just a year from now, it's almost like all that sinister fear and sort of reporting that was always talking about how we could be missiles landing on us from North Korea. It's almost like we're trying to turn off the show. We're looking forward. Trump still will bluster away, but it just doesn't being seen to be give the same seriousness as it was before November. It feels like there's been a mood change or a change in the weather, and I can't really put my finger on it.
Well, I think before in the lead up to the midterms, he was doing a lot of media. He was talking more than he is now. He was doing a ton of rallies. He hasn't really. He's done, I think, one since the midterms, and he was kind of ratcheting up that fear. The way that his rhetoric was very different than it's been for the most part since the midterms, and I think that he was trying to leverage, those fears about immigration or about North Korea to the Republicans' advantage on Election Day. And you notice he doesn't really talk as much about a lot of the things that he was talking about before Election Day since the results came in. So I think the media sort of mirrors him in a lot of ways that I think are probably destructive long term, and maybe we ought to try to reassess. But I don't think that the media. I hate saying the media like it's some big monolith,
mainstream media.
But I think that oftentimes the coverage is really just a direct reflection of how he is speaking and what he is putting out there.
But let me ask you, just because I know we have to wind this up. This is really, you have joined journalism. To go back to your sort of bath of fire in politics. You joined political journalism at a time, probably in a way that it's never been before, and to be, and going on from here maybe. What do you think you're going to? What are you going to take away from this? And maybe are you worried things might get boring if
normal people, no more wieners and Trumps?
Well, I think there will always be those, but what we've seen for the past 3 years is quite.
I think it's going to be lively and crazy.
I can't really think post-Trump. A lot of people, I've been asked a lot over the last probably like 6 months, especially about what am I going to do when this is all over.
And we could have another 4 more years.
I have a lot of difficulty thinking post-Trump. I can't think that far ahead. So I don't know what I'm...
Are you enjoying it? What you're doing?
No.
Keeps you busy.
Am I enjoying it? It's interesting, but it's sort of... It's interesting. I wouldn't say I'm enjoying it, though. I always feel like I'm kind of like here in D.C. or at the White House on some kind of research mission. It doesn't ever feel like real life in some way, if that makes sense.
You think it would have felt like real life with George W. Bush?
I don't know. The thing is, I don't have anything to compare it to.
No, that's what I mean. That's right.
Yeah, I
the
didn't
Clinton administration was crazy. People must have felt this will never be this way again.
And it's like it's almost like how most Christians think that the world will end, the rapture will come while they're alive, right? There's this kind of like egocentric way that we all look at the universe, like this is the craziest it'll ever be, or this is the last of its kind, whatever it is. And I guess I don't ever really consciously think about that, but it is difficult sometimes to not have context for Trump because I did not cover the previous administrations. So I feel like in some ways that's good because I look at things with kind of fresh eyes, but in another sense, it's probably terrible. And
I think, and we've talked about this last week, and I mean, it's probably going to be a theme of every week. We are still just absorbing what the digital age is bringing upon us, and look, in politics, it's having incredible effects, and on. So we're all coping, really.
Yeah,
I guess in the way that television changed politics.
I heard someone say
or the
last night.
printing press. I mean,
we keep going back.
But I think it's easy to kind of lose sight of the fact that we're in the Wild West era of the democratization of media and thought, being dispersed.
Anyway, Olivia, thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you for your wonderful reporting.
Thank you.
It is like having a very wise and funny guide through this strange administration.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
We don't know how she got to be so wise at such a young age. Usually it takes a long time. And there are many people in Washington that aren't as wise as you anyway.
Oh, well, thank you.
Maybe it was your...
I'm sure I'll fuck up somehow.
But just to reassure us.
Please.
Yeah. What do you do for
Go viral for a minute? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love that. I was so impressed by that young lady because she's a serious person and she takes what she's doing seriously and she's not part of the group think. She thinks for herself.
I liked it. You couldn't see this just listening to the podcast, but if either of us would express an opinion, she really paused to think about that opinion and take it in. And it was for a jury. I mean, that's in a way that maybe is the sort of more old-fashioned approach, or I guess it's more the reporter's approach is I want to know what the story is.
No, that's what
to the truth. I'm not interested in opinions. I'm not interested in...
And it's not all about me. And
right.
I think
like that to remove herself from the narrative.
No, she has an inquisitive mind and she's smart and I think it's no surprise that she's so successful.
Well, it's great as I walked her, as you know, from the studio to show her how to get back to the street.
Which is hard, getting out of the studio.
And of course she reminded me, and I felt like so stupid that we didn't ask her about this, because her boyfriend is Ryan Lizza, who is...
An Esquire.
Yeah, political correspondent in chief for Esquire. Mm-hmm. Wonderful, wonderful journalist. But they're writing a book together about the 2020 campaigns. And I said, is that? And she said, a relationship killer? And I said, yes, is that it? She goes, I don't know. We've written together before, so I think it's going to be okay.
It might be. No, you know what? If anybody could pull it off, she could.
Right. Well, and also, you know what? I don't think I'm not going to speak for you, Christina.
I don't know if we could we? I think we could write a book together.
Oh, yes.
As long as
we could do.
There'd be a lot of micromanaging
by
you, of me and my dog. But I think we could.
Well, I was not going to
on the 2020 election.
No, we could write. Our book would be so sexier than that.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is, I think I personally need to get out of the business of giving romantic advice to our listeners, because those of you who listen to the Valentine's Day episode, we think it's fun when listeners write in with their problems, and we just talk and give our sometimes very strong opinions.
Very strong.
What we think is going on. And so on the Valentine's Day issue, a lovely fan named Martin from Wiltshire in England wrote to us about this small and persistent issue he was having with his wife, which was she just kept telling a story about a compliment that backfired when they were first courting, and she'd tell it at every dinner party year after year.
And it was endearing, actually, but never mind.
It was endearing, but it clearly bugged him. So we talked about it.
There we disagree. I don't think it bugged him. I think he was amused.
The point was we had David, my husband, here, who also can get very... Can I say, like, rabbinical about these problems? You just pass them to us, and we just...
And then the Rebbitzin went right along with the rabbi, and you got carried away. And I was trying to tell you, these two people are having fun.
we overwhelmingly supported Martin's point of view. And then the next day, I got a note from Martin, which made very clear that we don't think his wife was, well, neither of them. They thought we took it too seriously.
They did.
I think we laid too much emphasis on how right Martin was. And he wrote us a note saying it was just really a joke. It was just a fun thing, which I think was true. And then I thought, okay, sorry, Martin, didn't want to cause problems for you. And then it hasn't gone away because his wife posted on Facebook a message to us. So we read it.
I think we got him in trouble.
Oh no,
Martin, we're so sorry.
Martin, we're sorry.
So
we want to bring people together.
She said, "Hi, ladies. I am the wife of Martin who asked your thoughts this week about him telling me I looked like a model from behind. We laugh about it, really, but my initial thought was that he didn't think I looked like a model from the front. But now we just laugh about it. I mention it amongst our friends because he is the nicest man and he doesn't mind being teased. Please don't ask David for any more relationship advice. Love the podcast."
Yeah, guys, if you're going to write to us advice, it could be searing. You may not like our advice. We're really, truly sorry.
And listen to me, because I have common sense.
The nicest person.
Not nicest. These two people love each other.
Yeah. No, I know because they've been married a long time.
And I wish I'm not sure that I look like a model from any direction. But if a man said that, I think he would be in...
Now you're causing problems again. We have to stop. Just stop on this problem. You guys have a wonderful, happy marriage together. Anybody else wants to risk sending in advice or questions, bring it on. And but beware. We're going to say beware. And I think that's it for this week. I think Izzy looks like she's so ready to get out of this studio.
Well, she needs a walk. And but you know who looks pretty cute from behind?
Oh, no.
Take that out. That was a joke.
Yeah, you've been talking about marrying Izzy.
No,
I'm getting worried about you.
Who do I want to marry lately? I had someone in mind.
As long as it's a human. Oh, I won't even say give it a gender. I won't give it a gender as long as it's human.
No,
Christina.
it was interesting, but I can't remember.
You have wanted to marry me for a long time.
No, a lesbian. I want a lesbian relationship without sex.
I think that's just this podcast.
Okay, let's go.
Okay, goodbye. Hey, thanks for listening to the Femsplainers. Stay with us by following us on Twitter and Facebook at Femsplainers and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. You can always email questions and comments to contact@femsplainers.com. We read every one.
We are part of the E1 network and record at the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C. And thanks to AEI Research Assistant Zoe Appler, who is our production assistant here in the studio, and thanks to Nat Frum, our audio and video editor, and occasional millennial mansplainer.
And listen to us on pretty much any of your favorite podcast platforms. And please remember to subscribe and like us at iTunes if possible. Every like helps us keep our solid 5-star rating. Cheers.